The boardroom was drowning in silence as the CEO of Bransford Industries flipped through a confidential payroll audit. The numbers were precise, the deductions neatly listed in columns, and everything looked perfectly predictable, until her eyes landed on one name: a janitor. The company's quiet, unseen custodian, a salary far below the average employee. And then something that made her fingers freeze mid-page: a voluntary donation of nearly half his monthly income to an unknown charity fund, labeled simply as Hope House. In a company of wealthy executives, lucrative bonuses, and stock dividends, this janitor's contribution was shockingly disproportionate. It didn't make sense. Why would someone with so little give so much? The CEO, Eleanor Bransford, sat motionless, trying to understand what sort of person would sacrifice so deeply when every dollar probably mattered to him more than any executive's salary ever would. If you believe kindness, sacrifice, and second chances can change the world, please take a moment to like this video, drop a comment, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Now, let's continue. In the early gray hours before sunrise, when the skyscraper's glass facade still reflected only streetlights, the janitor, John Marlowe, arrived at work as he did every day. His shift began at 4 a.m., long before employees rushed in with lattes, briefcases, and stress. He moved silently through hallways, sweeping floors still cold from the night, wiping smudges from doors no one bothered to notice, and carrying a tiredness in his bones that extended far beyond physical fatigue. He was in his 50s, with hair slowly surrendering to gray, and eyes that seemed to have lived far more life than his quiet existence revealed. No one knew much about him. He spoke politely, worked diligently, and never complained. To some, he blended into the background like the walls he cleaned. To others, he didn't exist at. Yet beneath that quiet exterior was a life built on heartbreak and choices no one would voluntarily make. Years ago, John had been a carpenter with a small workshop. He had a wife named Clara and a daughter named Lily. They lived in a modest home filled with love, dreams, and the faint smell of pine wood from his projects. But tragedy arrived like a silent thief, stealing everything. A factory fire broke out near their neighborhood, and smoke claimed the lives of both his wife and child before he could reach them. He remembered pounding through a wall of heat and flames, blinded, screaming, desperately trying to save them. But his hands had emerged only with burns and empty air. Broken by grief, he had lost his business, his home, and for a time, his will to live. The pain threatened to swallow him whole, but one day, while wandering aimlessly through the city, he stumbled upon a small orphanage that was in desperate need. The children there reminded him of what he had lost. Some had no parents at all, some had only pain in place of memories, and their tiny smiles cracked open a place inside him he thought was dead. The orphanage, named Hope House, was falling apart financially. The children were fed inconsistent meals, their beds creaked with old springs, and teachers struggled without proper materials. John began visiting whenever he could. He fixed broken chairs, repaired windows, and mended toys discarded as trash. The director told him they needed funds more than repairs, and without hesitation, John offered half of everything he earned from then on. It wasn't charity to him, it was redemption. It was a silent promise to a wife and daughter he still whispered to in prayer, that he would love the world's forgotten children, since he could not save his own. At Bransford Industries, no one had the faintest idea why John sometimes left work with tired, hungry eyes, or why his worn-out shoes had stitching he clearly did himself just to prolong their life. They didn't know that he skipped lunches to save a little extra or walked miles instead of paying bus fare. They saw a janitor, nothing else. That was enough for most of them. But it wasn't enough for the CEO after she discovered his hidden sacrifice. Eleanor Bransford was a woman of prestige, bearing the weight of fame and criticism in equal measure. At 40, she had built herself into an icon in the corporate world. Born into privilege but hardened by competition, she carried an aura that reminded people of strength more than warmth. The media called her ruthless, calculated, and brilliant. If employees ever thought of her as cold, she assumed it was just a side effect of leadership. She spent more time with decisions than emotions. But when she unfolded John Marlowe's records, something unfamiliar stirred inside her, a curiosity, a discomfort, and perhaps even guilt. The next morning she arrived unusually early, not in her luxury car or surrounded by assistants. She stood quietly at the end of the dim hallway where John worked, watching him wipe the elevator buttons, with the same patience a violinist had for each note. He did not see her at first. He was humming softly under his breath, a tune too gentle for the noise of business hours. She approached him slowly, unsure how to speak to someone she had never in her life even noticed before. Instead of praising him, or asking why he gave away so much, she found herself unable to form words. She simply introduced herself awkwardly, as if she were a stranger in her own company. He looked up at her respectfully, slightly surprised, but continued working, as though her presence didn't change his duties. She asked him about Hope House. His face softened, and his voice lowered, telling her only that it was a special place with children who deserved better than what life had handed them. He didn't brag, he didn't dramatize, he didn't share his tragedy. He spoke with humility, as if giving away half his earnings was nothing. Remarkable. Just ordinary decency. Eleanor left him without revealing why she had sought him out. That afternoon, instead of holding meetings, she drove to Hope House by herself. It was located in a neglected part of the city. The building was old, with peeling paint and a small playground that looked as though the wind alone might knock it down. Yet inside, she witnessed something she had rarely seen in the corporate world: happiness that asked for nothing. Children with worn clothes ran up to her with drawings and toys repaired with glue. They seemed grateful for scraps, but their smiles were wider than those of millionaires she'd negotiated with. The caretaker explained how Mr. Marlowe, the janitor from the company, came nearly every week to fix things, buy food, or simply sit with the kids to read storybooks. Eleanor listened quietly, absorbing every detail. She returned to her office late that evening, unable to shake off what she'd witnessed. Her desk, once a symbol of power, now felt strangely pointless. For the first time, she questioned what success meant if she never used it to help others. Corporate life had become numbers, profit margins, and competition. Yet this man, with no wealth, no titles, no spotlight, had done more good in the shadows than most philanthropists did in front of cameras. She stared at the city through her glass wall, thinking about how easily people become invisible to those who live above them. The next day, without warning, Eleanor walked into a company-wide assembly and asked every employee to attend. Executives rushed in nervously, interns scrambled for seats, and whispers filled the auditorium. No one knew what the announcement would be. When John arrived, looking confused as to why he was even required there, he stood at the very back, unnoticed among the crowd. The CEO took the stage with a somber expression. She began talking about gratitude, about humanity, about unseen good in the world. Her voice cracked at times, unusual. For a woman known for her poise, she spoke of how kindness rarely receives applause, and how some people change lives without any recognition. Then she announced that Bransford Industries would sponsor Hope House with full funding for renovations, education, food, medical budgets, and everything else the children needed. The entire auditorium erupted in applause. Executives looked stunned, employees curious. But Eleanor wasn't done. She asked for John Marlowe to come forward. At first, the janitor didn't move, thinking it must be someone else. Only when people turned to look at him did he realize she was calling his name. Nervously, he stepped through the crowd, trying to hide behind his humility. Eleanor looked directly into his eyes and publicly thanked him, her voice trembling with sincerity. She told everyone he was the reason the company would start investing in real causes, and she announced he would be granted a new company home, full benefits, and a bonus equivalent to a year's salary. As the room applauded, John's eyes filled, not with pride, but with a grief resurrected. He remembered his wife and daughter, imagined how proud they might have been, and struggled to hold back tears. The applause shook him. He wasn't used to being seen. Eleanor turned away suddenly, her face contorted in emotion she didn't want broadcasted. She stepped down from the stage and hugged him. No words, just the truth of human gratitude. And there, in a building driven by ambition, everyone witnessed something richer than profit. Two broken souls redeeming each other through compassion neither had expected to find. If this story moved your heart even a little, please support this video with a like, share it with someone who needs hope, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove kindness still exists. Before you read the ending, comment below, do you believe one quiet act of goodness can change an entire world? In the months that followed, Hope House transformed into a bright, welcoming home with new beds, books, teachers, and playground equipment. John still cleaned floors and fixed toys, but now he smiled more freely, not because his life suddenly became easy, but because he no longer carried his grief alone. Eleanor visited often, learning more about compassion from children than she ever had from business school. She donated quietly, without cameras, without headlines, without applause. John continued to give half his income even though he no longer needed to, because kindness was never about sacrifice to him. It was about love that survives even when the people you love are gone. In the end, it wasn't the CEO's wealth or the janitor's generosity that changed the world. It was the moment they chose to see each other. And in that recognition, a broken man found purpose, a powerful woman found humility, and dozens of orphans found a future worth smiling about.